I'm just waiting for all of the attendees to log in. Kind of populating slowly. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second part of this webinar series on alternative careers after orthopedic training. My name is Heather Kong. I'm the chair of the education committee for RJOS. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon in Portland, Oregon at the Shriners Hospital. And if you were not able to join us for the first part of this webinar a few weeks ago, it is on the RJOS website. So feel free to go back and watch that whenever you have a chance. Also, just a plug that our next webinar will be in early May, and it's going to be focused on foot and ankle. So stay tuned for emails about that. So we've got several great speakers tonight. We're going to start off with Erin Nance. Dr. Nance is an orthopedic hand surgeon who runs a private practice in New York City. She's also the founder and CEO of Hands On Media. She puts out videos on gender inequity in health and has had over 100 million views. She's also publishing a memoir about her time in residency to be published next spring. And there's also going to be a television program to follow on that. So that's really exciting. She's also the co-founder and CEO of Feel Better, which is a health informatics company. So take it away, Erin.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather, for having me. It's great I'm really honored actually to speak to my fellow female orthopedic surgeons. And I really feel like the purpose of me being on this call is to give you all permission to do the thing. Whatever that is, if that is a creative outlet, if that is a business venture, I'm going to, Heather laid out kind of all the different projects that I have, and that's the punchline. But I want to let you guys know that exactly 1 year ago, I would have been in your shoes watching this webinar as someone who only focused on orthopedics, running my own practice, very focused. And within 1 year span, I have become an influencer, an author, an executive producer of a TV show, and now the co-founder of a startup. So what I'm going to start with is the direct message that kind of changed the course of my life. And I had decided to start a TikTok account, and it was called The Hand Doctor. I did kind of day in the life videos of me in the OR and what it was like to be a hand surgeon. And that account was very popular. I mean, it had 25 million views, 20,000 followers. It was a successful account. And I got a direct message from a woman who said, "You don't know me, and I don't normally talk to strangers on the internet, but I am desperate. I have had severe fingernail pain for 10 years. I've seen 5 doctors. No one can tell me what's wrong with me. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. Everyone thinks I'm making it up. But if you just touch my finger, I jump to the ceiling. Can you help?" Now, I'm sure everyone on this call knows within those 3 words, severe fingernail pain, you know what this woman has, right? She has a glomus tumor. And because I can't help myself, I messaged her back and I said, "I don't normally talk to strangers on the internet, but do you have a little blue dot under your fingernail?" And she said, "I do have a little blue dot under my fingernail." And so I told her, "Listen, you're going to ask your doctor to get an MRI of your finger. It's going to show that you have a mass. They're going to take it out. It's going to be a glomus tumor, and you're going to be cured instantly." So then a month later, I get a message, "Oh my God, Dr. Nance, they did the MRI. It showed it was a mass. They took it out. It was a glomus tumor, and I feel amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you." So at the end of that interaction, I had 2 thoughts. I thought, why did it take this woman 10 years, okay, to get a diagnosis of a glomus tumor? It took 3 words. severe fingernail pain for me to diagnose her with a glomus tumor. And the answers are hiding in plain sight, right? I mean, one, she's a woman, so people think that their complaints are their symptoms are complaints. Number two, women, they present with different symptoms, typically for men, for a lot of the different diseases. And three, the eye only sees what the mind knows, right? So I don't know those 5 doctors that she saw, but if they weren't hand surgeons, they probably did not know what a glomus tumor was, and she was never going to get diagnosed with a glomus tumor. So this is when I thought, you know what? I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on the misdiagnosis that is going on in women's health. And that was the start of my little misdiagnosed kind of TikTok career. And it was exactly a year ago that this interaction took place. And in 1 year, my videos have been viewed 100 million times, and I have hundreds of thousands of followers. If you think of who is the most visible orthopedic surgeon, on social media, you may think it's Corey Calendine, or there's, a couple other people. It's actually me. And it's not something that I don't advertise. I have never once had a patient come to my office because they said, oh my God, I saw you on TikTok and I really want you to help me with my carpal tunnel. But that visibility really opened up a tremendous amount of doors. And it was that visibility that led to CAA, the talent agency, contacting me. That was my first introduction to the agent who helped me get a book deal with HarperCollins. Now, in addition to telling stories about patients, I had a very interesting personal story. My first day of work as an orthopedic surgeon, my brother, who was 21 years old, dove into a pool, broke his neck, and became a quadriplegic. So I told this story, and this was my first viral video. And I realized that the more and more I told these stories about my time as a female surgeon in a male-dominated field, it really resonated with people beyond orthopedics, beyond medicine, right? There are a lot of women who are welders. There are a lot of women who are, in sports management. And that's what I really tapped into, was this sense of just women who are minorities in many different fields. And I think one of the, I had that other channel, the hand doctor. I was very niche, right? I was talking about carpal tunnel and trigger finger and Dupuytren's. And so I was reaching a very narrow audience. And I kind of had to step back and say, what is the bigger problem that we're trying to address and we're trying to solve? So that was kind of my path to visibility. And through that visibility, again, within 1 year, I have book deal with HarperCollins. That book deal was then optioned for a television show with Jerry Bruckheimer. It's like Tom Cruise and me, right? Like that's who Jerry Bruckheimer is working with. But it was amazing that they were so interested in my story as a female working in a male-dominated field in orthopedic surgery. I think that's what really sold them. That was like my differentiator. So having that visibility really opened up a lot of doors. And I will say that creating a viral video is simple, but it's not easy. And just so you don't think like, well, how did she create 100 million view videos? I worked with a company that taught me how to reverse engineer viral videos. This can all be taught. I hope I'm an engaging, presence on film, but really it's more about the power of storytelling. And everyone here on this call has a story to tell. And I'll end with, I was speaking with my friend Deb Appleyard, who I told a really funny story about. She was pregnant with twins, and we were talking about the chapters from my book. and I told her that I have a chapter called The Day the Dicks Came Down. And that chapter is about my the ortho lounge. And when I was a resident, everyone's lockers had like a maxi pad, you know, on it, or Throckmorton sign on it, or just literally like cardboard cutouts of like dicks, like all over. And when I became chief resident, my first executive action was to take down all the dicks. And I went through every locker and I cleaned up shop. I took down all the calendars of the models. I took down like all of the stuff. And when I wrote that chapter, it wasn't until I wrote that chapter that I really realized the reason why I did that. It wasn't even necessarily for me, or even the other women who were going through the program, but we had a junior resident who was gay, had not come out. And I thought, how terrible to come every day to this lounge and have to see that and deal with that. And I told this story to Deb, and Deb said, every woman who is an orthopedic surgeon has a day the dicks came down story. And my point is that our stories need to be told, and our stories need other people to listen to them. And so again, not everyone in this call wants to become an influencer or wants to have a social media presence, but I really see the power in our stories, and I'm interested in amplifying all of those stories. So for anyone who has any interest in having a social media presence, I'm more than happy to kind of talk to you about my path, which has not just been about social media. It has now mushroomed into an empire. And so it all started with my expertise in orthopedics, but you can leverage that expertise into so many different avenues, to the point where I just came from a meeting to raise $3 million for my new startup. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. I think a lot of us underestimate ourselves and don't know how we can leverage that expertise. And there are many different ways that you can do it. So I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards if you have any questions about getting involved in media or how you can leverage media for your own practice. And I'm excited to hear about all of the other stories of everyone in the room.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. That was a great start. I forgot to mention earlier, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A tab, and we'll discuss them at the end. So next we'll move on to Kate Deisseroth. So she completed orthopedic surgery residency from OHSU in Portland, Oregon, served in the Air Force working as a general orthopedist at multiple Air Force bases. Then after separating from the military, she also worked in one of the VA medical centers in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. She currently lives in Anchorage, Alaska.
All right, thank you. That first story was amazing. So mine is a little more run of the mill, but I want to thank Dr. Kong for putting this together and RJOS. And I'll just talk about my journey, and maybe it will resonate with some people or give some people ideas who are considering kind of a shift in their career. Let me see. Did the screen share work?
Not yet. I don't see
Not
your
yet.
screen.
Let me hit it again. Okay, here we go.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. So let's see. There we go. So I graduated from orthopedic residency from OHSU in about 2008. And I'm a general orthopedist who was put to work by the military right out of my residency and didn't do a fellowship. My first assignment was at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. And that was a great place to practice. I did a huge variety of cases. You're kind of on an island up there. So, you know, we did sports, fractures, but literally everything, you know, peds, everything you do and don't want to do, you do. And it gave me a lot of great experience. It had always been a dream of mine to live in Alaska. And this definitely, you know, because I love the outdoors, and this was really a dream assignment. Some of these pictures are just of my work and our orthopedic clinic there. One of my favorite pictures is a picture of this moose on the bottom. He was stuck in the courtyard overnight in the hospital, and tried to get in for breakfast in the morning through like a sliding glass door. So as I approached 40 years old, after training, I decided to pursue motherhood on my own as a single mom by choice. And I had twin boys in Alaska in 2010. And as many people who are in the military know, our salaries are really quite low. And so anyone that has a growing family, often, or, you know, anyone on a military salary has a few side hustles, kind of depending on what you're doing, and has looked into maybe other ways to gain income. You know, for me, I was a solo parent and had to pay for not only my regular hours, which could vary, but call and things like that. So I'd have weekend sitters, weekday, weeknight, you know, this whole web of people that helped me out. So in 2013, I started working locums. You know, some of the other names used are orthopedic surgicalist or orthopedic hospitalist. And I found these positions mostly through word of mouth, through other people in the military. No specific training for this, but basically I would drive or fly to an underserved area and spend 5 to 10 days fixing hip fractures, or, you know, whatever else they needed that was mostly trauma-based rather than elective, and then leave at the end of that period of time. And I actually enjoyed this. It was kind of a challenge to be dropped into a new place and, you know, try to solve the problems that they had there. And then in 2000, and then so the first one was a clinical job, orthopedic locums. And then in 2014, I started doing independent medical exams, which are non-clinical. And again, this was through word of mouth. Another military surgeon kind of recommended me. In terms of training, I didn't do any specific training, but I shadowed the person who recommended me. And there's a lot of reference material that we acquired to be able to perform the service. So basically, I worked with a company that provides IMEs in Washington and Oregon, and performed an in-person history physical that's normal for, you know, any orthopedic visit, and a chart review, and made determinations for workman's comp or disability claims. And I actually found this kind of interesting too. It seems like in some states there's kind of a glut of claims to disability. A lot of them are completely valid, and that's great. You're able to okay those, and a lot of them are kind of soaking the system. So you feel like you kind of help out by sorting out what's what. And so that was my first entry into diversifying my career. Then after my military service ended, I separated at 14 years of active duty and moved to a VA hospital in Pennsylvania to finish out my 20 years. My practice there was mostly joints and fractures, still some sports. Again, I was, you know, a solo mom, and, you know, had to balance the call duties and work duties and childcare. And this all worked out kind of until the pandemic. So during the pandemic, 2 things happened. One, you know, I had immediate difficulty with childcare, and, you know, we had some people leave, and there was issues with call. And, you know, I talked to my chief of staff about decreasing my clinical burden, moving to part-time and not taking call. He was actually amazing and worked with me on this. And the second thing that a lot of people may have thought during the pandemic, or the pandemic made them think about wanting to be more present for your family, and getting more time for self-care and kind of appreciating your day-to-day life instead of working too much. And so these things were kind of forefront in my mind when I decided to make some changes. I began to brainstorm options for jobs. I talked to other surgeons. Like I said, I talked to the chief of staff at my hospital. I talked to people in RJOS. Actually, one of the people who helped me with this decision was Dr. DeMaio, who's one of the past presidents of RJOS. And she was at a VA hospital near me and also ex-military. So kind of looked at all my options and ended up going part-time clinical at the VA, still doing some IMEs or non-clinical work. And then I started part-time utilization management, which is non-clinical, and I'll talk about on the next page. And then I also did some physician consultant, kind of second opinion jobs that were remote chart review that didn't end up sticking, but I did that for a little while. Again, that was something that I found through friends of friends. And I felt like this was a good solution to kind of testing out other things, but still maintaining a part-time clinical practice. So the utilization management job that I ended up taking was, again, a job that I found through word of mouth and had a recommendation from the inside. I talked to surgeons at the company before accepting the offer, which is something I would encourage people to do to kind of feel out the culture. And these jobs are typically work from home, 100% remote, and you're evaluating imaging and surgery requests with respect to insurance or Medicare guidelines. And there's some written work on the computer, some peer-to-peers, talking to other surgeons. And I actually find this also enjoyable. You know, you use your orthopedic knowledge. You have a little online community of surgeons who work for the company. And I thought it was kind of interesting that 2 people from my residency were at this company. A lot of ex-military, a lot of moms who needed flexible schedules. And so I really enjoy the kind of the smaller subset of surgeons that I talk to on a daily basis. So it's, like I said, it's work from home, flexible hours, flexible schedule. That probably varies from company to company, but I don't have any weekends, no nights, no holidays anymore. It's a W-2 job with benefits, PTO, CME. Most of these jobs need board certification, current, and state licensing current, and like at least 5 years of clinical experience. You know, some people don't like the pay, but I've only been in the military and VA, so I've never really had private practice pay or anything that is very, that is, I've always been paid kind of mediocre salary. So the pay is fine for me. And I work about 32 hours a week. And so I started this transition kind of gradually with a part-time clinical practice and part-time non-clinical. And what was interesting is that my patients were really supportive of this and were really nice when I'd see them, once a week or something. They were very nice about it. And so were my colleagues. So it wasn't as daunting as I thought it would be, and found out that I was a lot happier not being under the stress of being on call and wondering about childcare and, all the million things that would go through my mind every day. And then last year, I decided to make the final leap and I moved back to Alaska, and this time without a clinical practice at all. So now I'm 100% non-clinical, working in utilization management. Haven't totally ruled out, I could still maybe do a little something, but I don't have immediate plans for doing that. And I'm okay not performing surgery. I've been in the field for 20 years, and maybe it's a seasons of life type thing. It's kind of nice now, kind of working from home and having flexibility. So, my schedule after my move last summer was working a little bit in the morning and in the evening. And then in the middle of the day, I would take my kids to their sports practices or, go explore. And then during the school year, I shifted my schedule to while they're at school. So I'm able to kind of move things around like that and do things that I wasn't able to do before. Like the picture with me in the glasses is at our 7th grade field trip that I got to chaperone, where they kind of took the whole class up a mountain right by our house. And it was amazing doing, being able to do stuff like that. And, right now I'm happy being non-clinical. And I know at the last webinar, some people talked about their job identity. And I know my kids will tell people sometimes that I work from home, or sometimes that I'm a doctor or a veteran if they're talking to other military people. Sometimes I'll call myself a surgeon or a recovering surgeon, which helps lighten it if people are kind of wondering what I do. And that's where I am now. So that's kind of one path, and one path that people can follow. And I think it's good to know that there are a lot of options out there for non-clinical jobs. Erin gave you one example, being an influencer, or you're doing all these things. You can also do other clinical or non-clinical jobs. And if anyone's thinking of doing this, I know I got most of my jobs through word of mouth, but now there's so much more out there. AAOS, RJOS, there's LinkedIn, Facebook. Basically anyone in the military probably has dabbled in this. And there's no one right answer for everyone, but there's a lot out there. And, you just need to ask and kind of look around. And I put my email at the bottom. I know sometimes people are hesitant to talk to other people about venturing outside of a typical clinical job. So I'm always happy to talk if anyone has any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Next, we'll have Dr. Jessica McMichael. So Dr. McMichael is board certified in pediatric orthopedic surgery and is also board certified in lifestyle medicine, which we'll hear more about. Her clinical interests include surgical fracture care and optimizing musculoskeletal health for all ages. She has more recently been involved as a surgicalist and also in physician coaching, which I'm excited to hear more about as well.
Thank you, Heather. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I wish I could have been present for the first one, because hearing all these stories is really wonderful and inspiring. And thank you to RJOS as well for even existing and making things more available to the women of orthopedic surgery. A housekeeping issue. I'm operating a small petting zoo out of my house, and at any given moment, there's going to be an eruption of major barking, or the bunny rabbit that's in a pen next to me is going to do something crazy. So I apologize for the noise if and when it happens. Okay, so I did not make a PowerPoint presentation, but I'll just start at the beginning, because the pathway has just kind of happened out of necessity. And I think it makes sense looking back, but it didn't really make any sense looking, from the beginning, looking ahead. I always wanted to be a doctor. In fact, I always wanted to be a surgeon, and was discouraged from being an orthopedic surgeon during medical school, like many of us were, because of some old fart that said we would be divorced 3 times and we'd be a horrible wife and mother and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't believe that. And so I went ahead and kind of went for it anyway. And what was so great about it is that every part of the pathway was very well defined. There was no unknown for me. Like, it was like, you just do these things, and if you do it really well, chances are you will land in a residency somewhere, which I did. And then residency, similarly, it wasn't easy, and there was a lot of dicks on the wall. I have a dick came down story too, but I'm not proud of it, so I don't share it with you guys. But it was all just really known. Like, you knew the party line. If you just towed the party line, and didn't disrupt anything. Like everything kind of was, you were just moving along. And I did really well in my residency. Again, it wasn't easy. You put up with the garden variety sexual harassment that happens regularly, but for the most part, I got a great education. I had really good mentors, and it was fine. The problem really occurred when I got out. So it's like you get out of residency and suddenly you're like, what now? Well, I was in the military as well. I did the HPSP program, so I was in the Air Force also, graduated in '09, and my first duty station was in Korea. So I had lived in St. Louis, literally in the St. Louis and surrounding 30 miles my entire life. I had never been anywhere. And went to Korea by myself with all my stuff and was like, okay, I'm here. I don't know how to be in the Air Force. I barely know how to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm all alone, but let's just do this and see what happens. It was fine. It was actually totally awesome because it was like a sink or swim kind of situation. And I met my husband there. So it was good on a couple of different levels. But again, so that was great. It was safe because you plop into something else that is very regimented and known. Like the military was an area of safety for me. So because I went to Korea, I was able to get my follow-on assignment, which was actually at my home residency program. It was a St. Louis University, and it was a program called C-STARS, the Center for Sustainment of Trauma and Readiness Skills. So it existed for general surgery, but it didn't exist for orthopedic surgery. The Air Force had this little contingency at this level 1 trauma center in St. Louis. That was the civilian trauma center. And I said to my chairman, and I was pretty close with the Air Force people on the general surgery side, and I said, well, why don't we have this for ortho? And they said, you're right, we need this for ortho. So my chairman said, well, we'll do it, but we don't want to take a chance on a stranger. So we'll only agree to allow the Air Force to be in our department if you're the first person who does it. So I got this super sweet follow-on assignment where I was in my hometown, where my mom would stock my fridge and do my laundry. And like not always, she would just pop over and surprise me from time to time. And then I worked on the trauma service at a level 1 trauma center. It was phenomenal. It was such an amazing opportunity. During that period of time, I got married, and my husband is a pilot. He was in Albuquerque and I was in St. Louis. And when it was time for us to kind of figure out what to do next, he was retiring. He's older than I am. So he was going to retire and I was going to separate from the military. I also happened to get pregnant all at the same time. So this is like the pivotal period of time. This is when things like start falling apart. My mentors said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to take care of adults and children's fractures. I wanted to be a fracture surgeon. And he said, well, you know, you don't really need to go do a trauma fellowship because you've been working here on the trauma team for 3 years as OJT. He said, unless you really want to do pelvis and acetabular surgery, go do a PEDS fellowship. And I said, okay. So I just, outside of the match, I went and did a PEDS fellowship and was pregnant at the time when all this was going down. And my husband separates, I separate. We move, we're finally in the same house. We have this newborn and we move to California from St. Louis. And he moves from Albuquerque to California for my fellowship. And I like collapsed. Nobody knows. There are actually people on this call who I know from that time. They don't know I was in really, really bad shape. Nobody could tell. And so now retrospectively, I know this is a thing that women experience. They will look fine on the outside, like absolutely fine. It's really scary actually, because you have no idea how horrible things are for them underneath this very, very polished surface. And I was a friggin' mess during my fellowship. I had so much anxiety. I could barely drive a car. I mean, I really struggled with anxiety. It was all, I think, postpartum. I had anxiety like my whole life, but this was a different level. It was like the hormonal postpartum stuff. And then seeing kids at Shriners Hospital in Sacramento, and you're just like, I have a newborn baby. Everything's going to go wrong with my child. I mean, it was really hard. Anyway, but somehow you white knuckle through it. You just kind of get through it. My husband was going through his own midlife crisis because he just separated from the military. And let me tell you, men do not do well when they have all of this coziness of regimented life and then all of a sudden it's gone. And he's a stay-at-home dad with a newborn and he's like literally losing his mind. So I don't know how we did it. It's kind of a miracle, but we got through it. And so we decided we were going to live in Albuquerque because he had a home there from his last duty station. And I'd gotten a job there. Like it sounds like the dream job on paper because it was 50% adult trauma and 50% peds. And the people were amazing. The residents were amazing. And I just like couldn't get my shit together. Again, if people are on this call, they know that you wouldn't be able to tell that that was going on because I showed up every day. I smiled. I was nice. I did good work. I did good surgery. I taught, blah, blah, blah. And at home, I wish I was going to die. Like that's when I knew something had to change because this was not sustainable. I'm like, how can I be this young and this fresh out of training and be this freaking miserable that I want to die? I wanted to evaporate and I wanted my daughter. This is so scary. And I'm very transparent about it now. I haven't been this verbal about it until the last couple of years, but at night I would just pray, just take me and Marin is my daughter, just take us away. I was like praying to God to just let me not wake up the next day because the anxiety and the situational pain was so strong. And that's a terrible place to be as a new parent. As a human, it's a terrible place to be. And so finally something snapped and I said, okay, what are you going to do? You can't live like this. So I started prioritizing my health, like my physical health. I just like went into full on action mode, lose weight, eat healthy food, prioritize your sleep, do. And then we ended up moving actually, like change your environment. We moved to Southern California, get a new job. I did all of that stuff and things were getting better. So that takes us from Albuquerque to Orange County, which is where I live now. And I went into private practice. Okay, so now we've got military, academics, private practice. I go into private practice in a very high cost of living area as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, no adults at all. And my partners were really great and they were all men. And I have a husband whom I love so, so much, but was not he was not keeping up with his end of the bargain at the home. And again, I found myself back in the same damn story. It's like, well, I have to do everything. I'm like busting my butt all day long. And then I'm on the phone with him on the way home and he's like, well, what's for dinner? And I'm like, motherfucker, like you tell me what's for dinner. It's so terrible. So, it was rough, right? It's like, okay, I made myself feel better. I did all these things to change and nothing really different here. And then that's where I learned about coaching. So I was commuting and I heard about this podcast and I was listening to it and it sounded like such a load of crap. It just sounded so dumb and so superficial. And I hated the lady's voice. So it was kind of like nails on a chalkboard, but something just kept pulling me back to listen to it over and over again. And I listened for about 6 months. And I'll remember I was on the 5 freeway and I don't remember the exact episode that I was listening to, but I'd been kind of like hearing the messages for 6 months. And then all of a sudden it was like a switch flipped in my brain. And I was like, oh, this is actually the thing that will help. I'd been in therapy a number of times over my lifetime, and I think therapy is absolutely amazing. And I'm in it again, and I encourage anybody to go get it. But this was different. It wasn't about trying to figure out what had happened. It was trying to figure out, okay, what's my plan moving forward? It was very forward facing, forward moving, strategic type of intentional living. And that's what was missing. So now retrospectively, I can see, okay, I was caught up in the vortex of living as a woman surgeon in the world. which you feel like you're at the mercy of everything around you, and then was able to transition into a position where I have agency. Like that's it, agency. So that day that the switch flipped, I was like, I got to teach this to people. So I went and signed up for coach training that night. I did that. That was in 2019. So I didn't tell you the years, but it doesn't matter. I was at UNM from 2014 to 2015, then moved to OC in 15 and was kind of like swimming in my misery here. And then in 2019, started coach training, was certified in 2020 and started a business and I started a private business where I coach other surgeons, and then started a group coaching practice with Kelly Casperson, who's a urologist, and then Amy Vertrees, who ended up leaving and doing Boss. She's a general surgeon. She does the Boss surgery series. They're both amazing. So we were doing the room 1 coaching through them or through us. And that had been kind of brewing in the background. And I'm like, okay, wait, I did it again. I'm doing the same thing. I'm overextended. I've got now all these businesses going and I'm still working full time. So I start pulling back the hours, clinical time, pulling back clinical time in effort to do this other stuff. And now all of a sudden I'm not making enough money to pay the mortgage. It's like, well, shit, something's got to give. And so I kind of like was trying to manage that for a while. And another switch flipped then in 2022 when I took my daughter to San Diego for spring break. And it was a 3-day trip, and I was freaking out about taking 3 days off because I was thinking, I'm not going to have revenue. This is terrible. We won't have enough money for the budget this month. And all our plans were messed up because I didn't do enough research about what happens on Thursdays in San Diego. Stuff closes down. And so we had to kind of flex on our plans. And it was awesome. We were being so spontaneous. And my sweet little girl is like in the sun, we're at Balboa Park and she's dancing in the sun and I'm watching her. And again, like getting struck by lightning. I'm like, I want to be able to do this anytime I want. I do not want this burden of this financial, it was like a puzzle I was always putting together, the financial puzzle. So that day I was like, all right, private practice is not going to work for me. And I told my husband, God bless this man, was on board. He's like, I trust you. We're a team. Let's get this done. And so I called an attorney. I figured out what's the best way to basically get a divorce from my practice. Like, how can we do this amicably? And to second what Kate said, I was very transparent with everybody and non-judgmental and gave everybody tons of time. I gave them 5 months and I was only required to give them 30 days. I wrote a letter. It was a really it was a letter indicating that me leaving the group was a service to us both, because it's the truth. And so I gave them 5 months. And then at the end of October 31st, 2022, I left private practice and was officially an independent contractor. So I started my own S Corp as an independent contractor, and still would kind of go back and do some work with them every month, or like 1 to 2 days a month, because a lot of my patients were reconstruction patients that you can't just abandon. It's really not, in my opinion, the ethical thing to do. But I told them, giving this big lead time, I was just telling all my patients, plan for this. We need to get you another doctor. I want you to be prepared. I won't be available after such and such a time. So since I worked there as an independent contractor for an additional year, I was able to really get all my most complex patients kind of tucked in with other people. And then in 2023, my plan for becoming an independent contractor was really to like ramp up the coaching business. But here's the funny thing. It turns out that I wasn't miserable anymore. And I was like, oh, wait, I don't hate orthopedic surgery. Isn't that funny? Like when you remove the things that you can't stand and you know what your currency is, finding out your currency is the absolute magical thing to do. My currency is time, not money. My freedom around my time is the thing that I value the most. So once I had that all established, that's the thing I wanted to protect was my freedom around time, I knew what I needed to do. So I got a job with Kaiser Permanente as a pool physician and started traveling within California. And that's a fairly lucrative thing to do. Kind of like Kate was saying, you can go away for 5 to 7 days, work, be completely separate from the family. You have to have childcare, obviously, but I found this for me to be the easiest way to practice orthopedics when I could just separate my home from work like completely. And then after that, in July, I got hired by Synergy Health Partners, which is a surgicalist company. And this has been by far the best job I've ever had. I go to this rural hospital in Northern California. It's like Virgin River, basically, and it's so freaking awesome. And I have 2 other partners, so it's kind of like a relay race with patients. I trust my partners, and I know that when I leave, my decisions will be upheld and vice versa. We talk to each other, we communicate, we have meetings. It's just a really, really good tight partnership. And it's in one of the most beautiful areas of California. So now, like, I cannot believe this is my life. I live a mile from the ocean in San Clemente, California. I hike by the ocean every day when I'm home. And then I go work up in Tahoe National Forest in the trees and in this really gorgeous Virgin Rivery type area. And I think to myself, this is a dream I never even knew I wanted. And it's my dream and it's totally come true. And I have total agency in my life. It's the craziest thing. So all of that was born out of necessity for mental well-being, emotional well-being. I was falling apart, and I will be honest with you, nobody could tell. It was all subsurface, and I've never been this healthy. Speaking of which, last year, okay, this is something that's always bothered me. The AAOS says that orthopedic surgeons need to own the bone. And I find that puzzling because bone is such a dynamic and complex organ. Like, why on earth would that be like our responsibility? We can fix the bone, but I don't think we should actually own the bone. I think we should share ownership of the bone, particularly with patients and other subspecialists. Anyway, it's my opinion, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I feel very strongly about this. And so anyway, last year, I got board certified in lifestyle medicine. And this has been amazing because now finally I feel kind of equipped to fill in a gap between what we know sort of at the basic science level and what we know at the tactical execution level for taking care of bones. Now I have this wide variety of things I'm able to offer to people with lifestyle. I don't even have to talk about Prolia and Zolendronate and stuff like that. I can just confidently counsel people around their lifestyle and things that they can change that are free and simple and doable. And I'm just finding it's filled a gap in my knowledge base and in what I can offer to patients. So interestingly, what I told my mentor nearly 20 years ago or so was that I wanted to take care of adult and children's fractures. And that's exactly what I'm doing. It just was like this super roundabout way to get there. And that's okay, because I've learned a ton. And now the new mission is my theory around what's going on. Again, my opinion. So I'm not trying to ruffle feathers here, but I think our healthcare system is sick. We probably all agree on that. But you can't have a sick system, sick patients and sick surgeons. I was a sick surgeon. I know that. And I may not have been physically unwell with cancer or diabetes or something, but I was sick. I was emotionally sick. And the thing that we can do is be well with ourselves. And the more of us that are showing up well is going to be one of the things that will help sort of shift things for the whole triad, as well as I think over time shifting the culture of surgery. And I know this is a completely different talk, I'm probably out of time, but it's going to take each of us kind of showing up in our most wonderful, unique ways in order to shift things completely. And I like to use a metaphor of an ecosystem. A healthy ecosystem is only healthy with diversity, with like a mushroom being a mushroom and an oak tree being an oak tree and a bunny rabbit being a bunny rabbit. Like everything has to have its special job that it's meant for in the ecosystem. And orthopedics is an ecosystem. And unless we kind of show up and do things like be an influencer or be a utilization review specialist or be a shoe designer, like unless we show up with that unique thing that we're like, it's just in us, I believe this, our ecosystem will not be well. It's like a responsibility to bring it out for our ecosystem to be well. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks to all three of you for really great talks. Like Jessica just said, I really love the diversity of all of your experiences and perspectives. And I think we have that in our audience too. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I guess to start off, any of you have questions or comments for each other after hearing each other's talks and experiences?
I want to know how I can go live in Alaska.
I know the market, I've tried to move back a couple times after I got out of the military, and the market is really saturated because it's a big man state. So all the military people want to come back here. So I tried a few times to go back clinically and then just said, I'll just stay on the East Coast. And but then once I was non-clinical, I thought, well, I could be anywhere. So I came back.
All right. Do any of you have recommendations for mentors that you felt were important, or courses, classes, anything that kind of got your foot in the door, separate from the clinical practice that you had?
My advice would just be to stay curious. I'm not sure how I came across this book, but it was written by Brendan Kane, and it was 1 million followers in 30 days. And I was like, that's like really like interesting. So I read the book, and then that's how I contacted him directly. He had a company called Hook Point, and they're the ones who taught me how to, reverse engineer videos. And so that really started from me just being curious and listening to podcasts outside of medicine, reading Wall Street Journal. I have a startup now in femtech, and so I listen to a lot of business podcasts. I speak to a lot of different types of people. I always thought one of the gifts I had was I never surrounded myself with doctors. Like even in college, I was not friends with anyone who was pre-med. I always surrounded myself with people from different sectors because it made life interesting, but also it allows you to make a lot of different, connections. I even see, trends that are in, say, fintech, and I'm like, this is very similar to even how we set up our own like EHRs, right? And so I think you can still use your background in orthopedics and apply it to different fields and vice versa.
Yeah, I like what she said about being curious. I think it's a good idea to, keep up conversations with other people about things that you're interested in. Maybe have a couple resumes, one that's maybe clinical, maybe one that's mixed, non-clinical, clinical, and just always kind of have feelers or an eye out there seeing what's going on. And the more people kind of talk and interact and network, the more you learn.
this is kind of in my niche for coaching, but I think women very often don't know what they want because we are raised in a culture that has taught us that we're not allowed to want anything. So nobody learns, right? Nobody learns to figure out what it is they really want. And it takes these like really, really ridiculously painful rock bottom type moments to figure out, oh my gosh, I know what I want. But here's the funny thing. Your complaints are basically the voice of your unmet desires. And I love thinking about complaints this way because your body and your brain and your heart knows what you want. You are your own mentor, so to speak. And as cheesy as this sounds, you already know. It just may not be obvious. So pay attention to what you complain about. And then when you notice what you complain about, get curious about what you complain about and be like, oh, what unmet need do I have that has given rise to this complaint? Or what unmet desire do I have that has given rise to this complaint? It is like literally a roadmap to tell you what you really, really want. And unless you practice, and this may not be true for everybody, but I had no idea. Didn't even occur to me that I could do things outside of the very narrow program that we were taught. And so if you don't know that you're allowed and then you don't know how to figure out what you want, that's a good place to start.
One housekeeping thing, can all of you, the three of you, put your email addresses in the chat window if you're willing to have people send you emails? There was a request for that. And
Where,
then,
um,
yeah,
I
if you
see it.
click chat, yeah,
Under
and
chat
then
or Q&A?
chat. I think
Okay.
everybody can see the chat part. Let me double check that. Okay. And then another question for Jessica and Kate, you guys both mentioned doing locums or kind of surgicalist work. And I think that's an area that's obviously becoming more and more common, but is still not really, there's not a lot of exposure to it early on in training and careers. How do you kind of navigate what types of those sorts of jobs would be a good fit? Like, how do you figure out which ones have like partners that you can work well with and trust? I feel like there's always apprehension about like coming in and then there's no follow-up for the patients and that sort of thing. So can you talk about your experiences with that a little bit?
When I started a while ago, I guess, and something that helped me was, I think there were a couple companies that were, surgeon owned at first. They may not be anymore, but those tend to be good companies to work for because they have more of the interest of the surgeon at heart, than maybe some of the locums companies. So look at who maybe owns the company. If there's any word of mouth, that's helpful. So a lot of times I would get word of mouth, from someone else in the military that was working on, one assignment. So they could fill me in about the people, who you'd be handing off with. And when you interview for the position, you can request to talk to the other people. The people can swap out, so it's not a guarantee that you'll have that same group, but it's always a good idea to talk to the other people in the group. That helps, and just maybe managing expectations a little bit, because you get thrown into maybe some crazy situations, and just trying to be flexible and kind of roll with the punches a little bit. I don't know. That was kind of my approach to it.
So I have not done locums actually. I did a whole bunch of research for it and then wrote an article for AAOS Now about locums, never having done locums. It's kind of hilarious. But the surgicalist thing is kind of like locums, but a little different because again, I have a contract with them that, I would promised a year. I promised I would return to the same place for a year. And then if everything went well, we could extend the contract indefinitely. But before I did any of that, I requested to speak to the ortho lead. And we spoke on the phone, and it was like instant chemistry, and it's a woman. So like, of course it was way better to talk to her. I sound like a reverse sexist, but maybe I am. Then I went for a visit while she was there during one of her shifts. And she just really took me under her wing, showed me the ropes, showed me the hospital. It was like a several hour visit on a weekend when not a lot was going on. I met the CMO that day, who happens to be really wonderful. And it was just, everything clicked, but I went in person. I don't know that I could sign a 1-year contract with a locums company getting sent wherever. I don't know that that would work for me. I like to have a little less variability. But I mean, it has been wonderful. And Kate's right. I don't know if these other 2 partners are going to continue on. And if they don't, then we're going to be like, okay, who's going to fill the spot? And in fact, we're looking for a 4th in case anybody wants to come to my version of Virgin River in California. It's absolutely awesome. I can't tell you how much I love it. But the other thing is you're right about having to be flexible. Rural medicine, boy, oh boy, unless you have exposure to it in residency, it is like a specialty unto itself.
Mhm.
Geriatric orthopedics is also a specialty unto itself. And I do think it's important to make sure where your comfort level is with some of this stuff, because your resources are pretty limited at times. Yeah.
And then there was a request. Can you guys both put in the chat any specific companies that you feel like have been trustworthy or good to work with from a surgicalist or a locum standpoint? And then one last question for Erin. There's somebody who is thinking about developing more of a social media presence, but they have apprehension about just kind of like putting their life out there in the public and what that means. Did you have similar apprehensions, and how did you deal with that?
So that's a great question. So first of all, I made a very conscious decision to only put myself on camera. So I do not include my patients. I do not include any current cases that I'm working on. I don't have my daughter, my husband. It is just myself on camera. And there are some other like really successful surgeons who film with their patients, who film with their kids, and that's just a choice that I made. Another thing to be aware of is I'm a solo private practitioner. So once I graduated fellowship, I literally hung my shingle and started my own practice. So I don't have anyone looking over my shoulder saying like, oh, well, you talked about, pre-authorization denials or whatnot. I don't have to worry about getting fired from Mount Sinai, or if you've ever seen my channel, I was fired before I was hired by Mount Sinai for asking about call requirements. So I have a bit more freedom than you just have to understand. There are probably like 5 years ago, if you were employed by a hospital and you went on social media, you could be fired. Now the tide has turned where most places love the free exposure, right? They can't have more people talk about their hospitals and everything. So you do have to understand the environment that you're creating the media in. There are social media policies with a lot of the different contracts that you're signed. Go and check your own, contract. But for the most part, part of the reason why I started on TikTok is because no one that I know is on TikTok. So I basically created all of these videos without anyone ever even knowing that I did it. And it gave me a lot of freedom. If I made a video that only 100 people saw, who cares? Who cares? I've made some videos that 10 million people have seen. So I loved it because it gave me a lot of creative freedom. I actually was a little taken aback yesterday because a very popular menopause doctor. Her name is Mary Claire Haber. She reposted one of my videos from a year ago on Instagram, where a lot of my friends are on, and that video went viral yesterday. It got over 1 million views, and people said, "Oh my God, I saw you on on Instagram," and I kind of was taken aback, that I had been outed, been recognized. But you just decide, okay, what is the goal of me being on social media? For me, the goal was to generate visibility, and the goal was not to drive traffic to my office. And because that was my goal, I could speak about a large number of topics. I could speak about endometriosis. I could speak about, misdiagnosis in women. I actually almost never talk about anything orthopedic or hand related at all. So you just have to understand, what is your goal for being on social media, and then what is the best way to achieve that goal, whether it's just like simple one-on-one. Sometimes I do videos where I go through like research papers and I really simplify it for people. I used to get really into like the trends of the videos, which were so much fun, but then it takes a lot of work to create these videos. And I found that I was spending too much time on social media, to the detriment of like my family and just like my time spent online. So then I said, you know what, I'm no longer going to follow trends. I am going to be the trend. And that's when I created Little Misdiagnosed, and I created my own kind of structure for making videos. So I would say you have to decide for yourself what you want to include about your life. If you just want it to be about yourself, or you want to include your practice or your family, that's a decision that you get the choice to make.
Awesome. Any last comments from the panel? I apologize to everyone. Taryn Rose was not able to make it at the last minute. So, but thank you to our three panelists who were able to make it, and for sharing your stories, challenges, vulnerabilities, everything. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.